This segment of Delmarva Life is brought to you by Peninsula Regional Medical Center.
Take a moment to think about your family history. Perhaps you have or had a parent, grandparent, or an aunt or uncle who developed a deadly type of cancer: breast cancer, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer. Would you want to know your odds of developing the same disease?
Well, actually, it is easy to find out thanks to something called genetic counseling, and it's been making headlines this year in Hollywood. Well, joining us today to tell us a little bit more about it is Dr. Thomas DeMarco, who is the medical director of the Richard A. Henson Cancer Institute at Peninsula Regional Medical Center. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm going to start at the very simple question. What is genetic counseling?
Well, very good question. Basically, genetic counseling has really resulted from all the information that we've gained from the Human Genome Project. We figured out all the chromosome sequencing and all the genes in the human being, and therefore what we looked at is areas that the chromosome or the gene was abnormal, resulting in certain cancers or certain other medical abnormalities. And so if you can identify some of those, then you can predict someone's predilection for developing a cancer, perhaps.
So what does it actually do? What does your counseling do?
Well, the most important thing is a lot of people think that it's just a simple test. You get a saliva test or a blood test,
right,
and you're going to look at the chromosomes and see if there's any mutations or abnormal genes there. But basically, the most important thing is the counseling aspect. We actually have counselors that are very specialized in knowing anything about hereditary disease and genetics. And these people will actually look at someone who we think might be at high risk. They'll examine their family tree, their family history, go over all the people who might have had cancers or other diseases, and then decide whether or not they're at higher risk and whether or not they would benefit from genetic testing. So not everybody should be tested, basically.
Right, which leads us to the next question. Who's
Right.
a good candidate for
Right.
genetic testing?
Well, I think from the oncology point of view or the cancer testing point of view, the most common are breast cancer patients. If your mother has had a breast cancer, or an aunt has had a cancer, or if anyone has had a cancer at a very young age of breast cancer, then those are patients that definitely should probably have genetic testing.
So we're talking specifically cancers right now, but this will actually apply to other things as well.
Correct. There are a lot of other symptoms and diseases. For instance, Alzheimer's disease is one. Cystic fibrosis is another one. Spina bifida, Down syndrome, things like this we can identify from gene testing.
Now, it's relatively new, genetic testing, so what kind of impact has it had on determining disease?
Right. The Human Genome Project wasn't completed really until the mid-90s, but I think the first cancer that we really recognized that had a gene abnormality was one of the leukemias. They developed a process where they could look at chromosomes, and they found out that one of the chromosomes was actually abnormal in people who had a certain kind of leukemia, and it was called the Philadelphia chromosome. It was discovered in Philadelphia, and that was the first example of genetic testing that helped us diagnose different cancers. Now what we've learned is that we're trying, instead of to diagnose something in retrospect, we're trying to look at it from the prospective point of view, of looking at a family and saying, well, if there's a lot of cancers in your family, or specific types of cancers, or very early cancers in the family, then those are the families that might benefit from genetic testing.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. It's come so far. So many things have happened. If this is such a good way to tell, why don't we just go ahead and do this all the time?
Well, one of the reasons is that not all the cancers that we can predict, we can prevent, okay? And I think as time goes on, this is going to be much more important, because if you look at cancer treatment and where we are, basically it is a lot more cost effective and more clinically effective to either prevent a cancer or to diagnose it very early. And what we have been doing basically is spending a lot of time, money, and effort taking care of more advanced cancers, because we really didn't have the ability to diagnose them more early or to diagnose them in a population that might be at risk. So this is where genetic tests can really take us. It can really change the emphasis on how we approach cancer care. We can, in essence, predict it more accurately and have early testing for somebody, so that if they do develop a cancer, we're going to know that earlier, and their chance of cure is going to be greatly increased, and also the expense of the healthcare dollar will be markedly decreased.
Now let's take it a step further. Could you possibly do genetic testing to determine if someone might have autism or something like that?
I really don't know too much about autism to see whether that's the case, but I know they're working on a lot of that. But I think as time goes on, the more and more research that we have in the genetic testing field, the more success we're going to have, and certainly there are going to be a lot of other diseases and other problems that we're going to be able to diagnose. And hopefully the whole point is prevention and early diagnosis. To find something out after the fact when things are farther down the line is not really what we want to do. What we want to do is be able to predict them. So example, let's say if someone had a long history of breast cancer in their family, maybe that person should have mammography at a younger age more often than someone else.
Right.
And I think the other thing is that people have to recognize that just because you have a test, the test in and of itself is not always a black and white test. It has to be interpreted. They can be a low risk, a medium risk, a high risk. And so therefore you need a genetic counselor to not only look at your family history, but also interpret your testing. Hence genetic testing and genetic counseling.
And PRMC has a program to offer
Yes,
that.
sir, we do.
And you have an event coming up because you need to pay for that free
Right.
event.
I think one of the problems with genetic counseling and testing is that there are a lot of insurance companies that don't really cover this, okay? As important as it might be, again, we're early on this and a lot of insurance companies don't cover it. At Peninsula Regional and at the Richard A. Henson Cancer Institute, we have a genetic testing program, and basically this is free of charge. So what we have is once a year we have an event, and it's a 5K walk run. Bring your dog for a little extra, whatever. And all the money that we raise in that event goes to funding our genetic testing for the entire rest of the year.
And that's
Dr.
going to be
DeMarco,
Saturday,
thank you
November
so
9th.
much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wonderful to
And
have
of
you.
course, if you would like to read more from PRMC about genetic counseling or to learn more and sign up for the upcoming Roots Run that we spoke about, go to delmarvalife.com and click on the show tab. Well, still ahead on Delmarva Life, we're all looking for ways to save a few bucks. It could be as easy as taking a look at your car insurance policy. We're going to learn what can actually drive up your rates and find out about discounts that you might not even know exist.
And a little bit later on, we're in the kitchen with Old South Barbecue, putting together a chicken dish that's going to make your taste buds tingle. But first, we've been talking about our health. Now let's talk about our heart. Would you know if you were having a heart attack? Dr. Oz has more.
Did you know half the people who have heart attacks never even feel a symptom? As a cardiac surgeon, I think it's crucial for you to know the most common signs. Chest pain. It can feel like pressure, fullness, or squeezing. This is often mistaken for heartburn or indigestion. A discomfort radiating in the upper body, into one or the other arm, back, neck, jaw, or stomach. Difficulty breathing or shortness of breath. Breaking out into a full cold sweat. Waves of nausea or dizziness. And lastly, you might experience sudden extreme fatigue. The best time to treat a heart attack is within 1 to 2 hours of the first symptoms. Waiting any longer increases the possibility of damage to the heart and the chances for survival. Know the signs so you can act before it's too late.